Welcome to TrineDay's Roundtable 23. A better reset for economic justice and peace starts by honoring the real Earth Day. And the one coming up is March 19th, 2024. I am Bruce DeTorres, moderating. First, we'll have some presentations, and then everyone can participate in questions and answers. First, Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould will present. Paul and Liz are husband and wife writers and journalists who wrote the 2-volume book that inspired these roundtables, The Valediction, about the truths they found in Afghanistan after the Soviet invasion in 1979. Truths that the American media did not want the American people to know. The synchronicities that have happened along the way are literally mind-blowing. Paul and Liz have also written a proposal for world peace based on economic justice that can be found at valediction.net. That's valediction.net. Click World Peace in the top banner. Then Alanna Hartzok will present. Alanna is an Earth rights visionary and expert in the economics of Henry George and much more. But first, our host, who has published more than 160 books that challenge official history, Kris Millegan.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you all for spending some time around this table discussing hopefully a better future. And, I was thinking about my good friend Daniel Hopsicker, who passed away in August. And, he was quite a researcher who the mainstream just loved to ignore him, but like to take little snippets out of what he found. And one thing that he always would say, God bless the United States of America, because he was stomping on some toes, sometimes some official. And like he said, if he was in any other country, he would have been shot for doing what he was doing. So we're awfully lucky that we have the ability to discuss our government, discuss the world, discuss the future. And then this week, I came across a quote from John Fitzgerald Kennedy. It was, in the past, those who have foolishly sought power by riding the back of the tiger ended up inside. And then I went to look and see where that came from. Well, it came from his inaugural address. And I'm going to read a little bit of it because he was a great man. And he tried to take us forward. Well, that didn't happen. So it's kind of us people and all of us around here to try and get us in a forward position. So let us begin anew, remembering on both sides that civility is not a sign of weakness, and sincerity is always subject to proof. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. Let both sides explore what problems unite us instead of belaboring those problems which divide us. Let both sides, for the first time, formulate serious and precise proposals for inspection and control of arms. Let both sides seek to invoke the wonders of science instead of its terrors. Together, let us explore the stars, conquer the deserts, eradicate disease, tap the ocean depths, and encourage the arts and commerce. Let both sides unite to heed in all corners of the earth the command of Isaiah to undo the heavy burdens and let the oppressed go free. And if a beachhead of cooperation may push back the jungle of suspicion, let both sides join in creating a new endeavor, not a new balance of power, but a new world of law where the strong are just and the weak secure, and the peace preserved. All of this will not be finished in the first 100 days, nor will it be finished in the first 1,000 days, nor in the life of this administration, nor even perhaps in our lifetime on this planet. But let us begin. In your hands, my fellow citizens, more than mine, will rest the final success or failure of our course. Since this country was founded, each generation of Americans has been summoned to give testimony to its national loyalty. The graves of young Americans who answered this call to service surround the globe. Now the trumpet summons us again, not as a call to bear arms, though arms we need, not as a call to battle, though embattled we are, but a call to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle, year in and year out, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, a struggle against the common enemies of man, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. Can we forge against these enemies a grand and global alliance, north and south, east and west, that can ensure a more fruitful life for all mankind? Will you join in this historic effort? In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hours of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire that can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. Finally, whether you are citizens of America or citizens of the world, ask of us here the same high standards of strength and sacrifice which we ask of you. With a good conscience, our only sure reward with history, the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own. Amen.
Thank you very much, Kris. And now Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould.
Okay, well, we are certainly going to be talking about the real Earth Day and the Equinox Celebration and all the things around that. But before that, we first want to give you an update about what scholar and researcher Ed Dodson has provided for us, a new document. And it's very exciting because it was actually written by John Fitzgerald about his role as mayor. And it not only has a new chapter on his enthusiasm regarding the Georgia solutions for Boston, he also wrote a chapter critiquing Senator Henry Cabot Lodge Sr. And for those unfamiliar with Lodge, here is a short bio. Born in Boston in 1850, he became the scion of two powerful Brahmin families who had racked up generations of political currency dating from the founding days of the Republic. Lodge received degrees in government from Harvard and history. While there, he joined the oldest elite club in America, the Porcellian Club. In the 1880s, he ran for state legislature and for the U.S. Senate. He was elected to the Senate in 1892 and served as president pro tem and chair of the Republican Conference, making him the majority leader until his death in 1924. Needless to say, Henry Cabot Lodge was a very influential political figure. And now we know why it has been claimed that the Cabots talk only to the Lodges and the Lodges talk only to God. The reason this chapter is so special to us is because it connects Honey Fitz, the nickname for John Fitzgerald, to the larger Fitzgerald legacy surrounding JFK that was the original purpose that we created the roundtables to explore. Now we can bring that part of our purpose back through Honey Fitz. This chapter will give you an intimate understanding of what we would describe as the Fitzgerald legacy itself. It's what it's all about. What kind of people are these Fitzgeralds? And the answer revolves around why Honey Fitz took Lodge on so forcefully. The reason was because basically Lodge failed the American people he represented. And the fearlessness, not just to hold that opinion, but to go public with his observation, harkens back to the Desmond Fitzgeralds. Their willingness to take on the power brokers of London, and finally the Elizabethans on behalf of the Irish people, had the same clarity and uncompromising purpose. I have come to know and appreciate that kind of Fitzgerald quality from knowing Paul for over 50 years. The short and skinny is that Honey Fitz was with the people, just like Henry George was, his Irish Desmond Fitzgerald ancestors, and JFK too. And for those of you who did not attend the earlier roundtable discussions about the Fitzgerald history, please watch Roundtable 6. We're going to be posting all of these details in the chat. So when you have the opportunity, you can get this history. And it goes back to the origin of the Fitzgerald family 1,000 years ago and connecting it back to the assassination of JFK. And by the way, just for your information, we'll be presenting that Fitzgerald history at the 60th anniversary of the JFK assassination at the Dallas Convention on November 17th. And now Paul is going to read the chapter from Honey Fitz's books, Letters and Speeches of the Honorable John F. Fitzgerald, 1906-07, 1910-13.
The Senatorship. Speech at Faneuil Hall, October 26, 1912. Henry Cabot Lodge, senior senator from Massachusetts and boss of the Republican state machine, is not yet condescended to tell the people whom he intends to select as the Republican candidate for the high honor of following his advice and footsteps in Washington. We know, all of us, that 3 prominent Republicans are already seeking Mr. Lodge's approval, and we are all told this week that should the Republicans control the General Court of 1913, the National Council of Republican Statesmen, of whom Senator Lodge, Senator Penrose, Senator Smoot, and Senator Warren of Wyoming are members, would undoubtedly decide to compromise the contest in Massachusetts by inducing Senator Crane to succeed himself. That, as I understand it, is the program already decided upon. But from Senator Lodge comes not a word as to the name and quality of the United States Senator whom he would select for Massachusetts should the voters of Massachusetts permit him to make the selection. He has told us of 4 Democrats whom he would approve as Democratic candidates before a Republican legislature, and he has warned us first against the sinister influences which would control a Democratic senator, and later against, quote, fastening on the state for 6 years any man to whose name our children and our children's children would wish to close their eyes when they read the history of the times, end of quote. I will not deny exact knowledge of the candidate whom Senator Lodge has in mind. His scholarship, his breeding, his ancestry permit him to attack me only by indirection, but his political upbringing in Massachusetts, his political associations in Washington, and the character of his political methods as the Republican boss of the state induce him to go up and down the Commonwealth uttering his warning against sinister influences and painting pictures of a dismal future should one particular name be added to the roll of statesmanship, on which is now the name of Henry Cabot Lodge, and on which until lately were the dishonored names of his friends and associates in statesmanship, Lorimer and Foraker. The Democrats of Massachusetts have been willing to do what Mr. Lodge has never been willing to do. They have been willing to submit the choice of senators to the people. But Senator Lodge would not now be senator if the members of his own party or the people could have passed upon his candidacy 2 years ago. But it was not the purpose of Senator Lodge, and it is not now his purpose to permit the people to make their own decisions. Senator Lodge has been confident always that he could control any legislature when necessary. and he has always been fearful that he could never control the people. Methods which have pursued in this state for years, whenever the people have shown a disposition to revolt, are being used now. The interests are making their last stand. Weeks, Draper, and their friends, candidates of wealth, have made large contributions, and already there are the unerring signs of an attempt to buy what cannot be obtained in just debate. The public is being told by the subsidized portion of the press that the Boston machine is endeavoring to control the general court. It was argued 2 years ago that the Boston machine, if Mr. Foss should be elected, would control the governor. To what extent has the governor been so controlled in his public service? In what way, by so much as a hair's breadth, has he swerved from the path of duty because of the fact that the Boston machine supported him for nomination and election? This cry is raised solely to divert attention from the fact that the Republican interests are even now flooding the state with money. In Scribner's for November, Mr. Lodge tells us that in his 4 years at college, he never studied anything, never had his mind roused to any exertion or to anything resembling active thought until his senior year. He stumbled into a course in medieval history. He has never emerged from that course in medieval history. The robber baron is still his highest ideal and his dearest friend. His work at Washington has been for a very few, and they, let us be thankful, are not the names to name the United States Senator next year. The political career of Senator Lodge is instructive. Today, he poses for purposes of his own as one whose political pathway lies along a higher level than that of the average man, and especially that of any Democrat who may be mentioned. Are there any here who remember his efforts to break into Congress as a member of the House? Are there any here who remember the methods employed in his behalf in Charlestown and in Lynn? If sinister methods are not resorted to by him and with his approval, then it is because the word sinister is not black enough to do justice to the subject. But it is not necessary to dwell on what Mr. Lodge did to obtain and retain a seat in the National House. Turn to his first campaign for the United States Senate. That would seem to be a proper subject for brief consideration in view of his tender and almost pathetic solicitude at that time for the standing of that body, which has been recently deeply stirred by the rejection of Senator Lodge's companions in high senatorial circles. May I call the attention of the people of Massachusetts to an editorial utterance by Harper's Weekly of New York on January 21, 1893, after he had achieved his heart's desire. He, Lodge, pressed upon the legislature a gerrymandering scheme for the shamelessness of which even his followers recoiled. He laid the wires for the election of members of the legislature favorable to himself. He brought about the holding of snap caucuses, outdoing our own Hills and Murphys. Had he devoted the ability and time and labor he squandered on this miserable business to the earnest study and treatment of public questions and to the establishment of a solid reputation as a statesman, the senatorship would have come to him as a free offering by a state proud of him instead of his running after it like a man who would steal it if he could not get it honestly. That is not the charge of a Democratic newspaper intent on making political capital. It is the opinion of an independent Republican weekly, which compared Lodge with Hill and Murphy and decided that he had outdone them. What was true then has been true ever since, as every impartial intelligent citizen knows full well. Possessing ability, education, and family prestige, he has preferred to sacrifice the interests of the people of the Commonwealth to interests that were not those of the people. He has sneered at every man, Democrat or Republican, who has dared to insist that he shall try to represent the people, and he has split in two the Republican Party of Massachusetts because he carried his autocracy in behalf of private interests into all his methods and purposes as a political leader. I am willing to compare my record with that of the Senator Lodge. I have tried to do something for the people of Boston, and I think that I have done something. I have not been afraid to give my name and energy in order that Boston may be made bigger and better and busier. And even while I have been doing it, Mr. Lodge has used the incomparable sneer. If I should be nominated for and elected to the United States Senate, I would do what I could do for the people of the Commonwealth and their interests. I believe thoroughly in waterway development. What has Senator Lodge ever done except sneer when it has been proposed to bring relief to the cities of Springfield and Holyoke on the Connecticut, to Lawrence, Lowell, and Haverhill on the Merrimack, and Brockton on the Taunton River from the exactions of transportation monopoly? The projects of waterway development are feasible and businesslike. The government can amply afford to finance them, and from every standpoint except that of the corporate interests which Senator Lodge consistently represents, they are eminently desirable. I will admit that I lack the opportunities which Senator Lodge had to prepare myself for public service. I was born in a humble section of the city and with an environment that did not make for culture, though it made for ambition. I did not get a college education. What I have been able to do, I have been able to do because of my own energy and my own desire to accomplish something. What Senator Lodge has failed to do, he has failed to do in spite of all the advantages of fortune. In contact with the people, he becomes an aristocrat. In contact with those who represent unworthy interests, he becomes their ally, their friend, yea, even their servant. Senator Lodge should come into the open in his references to, quote, sinister influences. I am not controlled by sinister influences. I have not, as my political representative and advisor, such a man as J. Otis Wardwell, who for 20 years represented the corporate bribers on Beacon Hill until he became so notorious that he was driven forth. He has never become so notorious as to forfeit the confidence and esteem of Senator Lodge. In Washington, as in Massachusetts, Wardell has been at the elbow of Senator Lodge and during the consideration of tariff schedules affecting the corporations which control the Lodge machine. Wardell, representing the trusts and the machine, has made his headquarters in the rooms furnished by the government for Senator Lodge. Can Senator Lodge deny this? Sinister influences? What influence was so close to Senator Lodge that his own private secretary, indicted and convicted of a serious offense in connection with his activities as a cog in the Lodge machine, forfeited his bail and departed hence? His whereabouts are now unknown to Lodge and other Republican leaders. Have they made efforts to apprehend him and thus uphold the fair fame of the Commonwealth about which, on occasion, Senator Lodge is so deeply concerned? I refer to such subjects with reluctance, but I refer to genuine and very palpable influences which have been close to Senator Lodge ever since he decided to represent the corporations and to give occasional oratory to the people instead of continual and patriotic service. To what future of shame will Massachusetts be condemned if it is again to be delivered into such hands? Elsewhere, all over the country, the people are coming into their own. In New England, they are taking charge of their own concerns. Hale of Maine saw the coming of the storm and took to cover. In New Hampshire, the people put Bass at the head of their affairs and are still on the road to progress. Aldrich no longer misrepresents Rhode Island. Depew and Platt no longer misrepresent New York. Foraker is gone. Lorimer is gone. Everywhere the senators of the people are ousting the senators of the interests. Penrose and Lodge and Smoot remain. Let the people assert their right to choose their own representatives to the end that, quote, we may have a just government of laws and not of men. That's
the
it.
chapter. And
Wow.
now Alanna is going to read to us a letter that she composed. It's the first draft, so we're giving you an opportunity, get your input and what you think of it. And this is going to be the letter that's going to be sent to Dennis Kucinich, who Alanna knows personally, as head of the RFK presidential campaign. What we want to do is introduce RFK to his great-grandfather's embrace of the Georgist Earthright solutions. We also want to encourage him to sponsor an Equinox Earth Day event and to add our campaign of economic justice and peace based on JFK's peace plan to his presidential run. Alanna, please.
Thank you, Liz and Paul. I love how you read that about the Cabot Lodge. When I first read it, I didn't resonate as much, and then Liz explained to me the importance of who this man was, Henry Cabot Lodge, as a power monger, and how Honey Fitz really stood up and spoke truth to him, and that really came through how you read it. So thank you. And before reading this, I want to thank Herb Goldstein, who's on our call, because he also brought our attention to the book that I believe you found that in it was Honey Fitz's book of his collection of writings, correct? I think that's extracted from it.
Yeah,
So thank you, Herb. So this was composed just yesterday and sent to Diane Perlman, who has a direct connection with Dennis Kucinich. So, greetings, Dennis. You may recall that I met with you and Elizabeth, that's his wife, in your DC office several years ago. Also, that you called me once one evening to thank me for reminding you of the connection of Mayor Tom Johnson, was the earlier mayor of Cleveland, to Henry George. I think you have a copy of my book, The Earth Belongs to Everyone. If not, I'll send it. Recipient of the Radical Middle Book Award. I've also been a United Nations NGO representative for over 20 years. Ran for Congress twice, both Green Party and Democrat Party. I'm administrator for the International Union for Land Value Taxation on the board of Common Ground USA. In that you have major leadership responsibilities for the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. presidential campaign, I want to bring to your attention the work of Paul Fitzgerald and Liz Gould in tracing the Fitzgerald family history back over 500 years to the end of the Desmond Fitzgerald family rule in Ireland, where they were defeated by the forces of Elizabeth I. Paul and Liz trace the beginning of the British Empire, British East India Trading Company with this battle. They write and speak about mystical imperialism, which they discovered was an undercurrent motivation for the assassination of JFK. They've also worked with Oliver Stone, who was interested in their fascinating books and narratives. Paul and Liz found much inspiration in JFK's peace speech given at American University. In the past few months, they have come to grasp that the economics of Henry George, as in line with the perennial wisdom teachings on economic justice, is key to an economics of peace. Thus, I have been presenting with them in their TrineDay Roundtable seminars. Most recently, we have found articles about and by John Fitzgerald, Honey Fitz, who was mayor of Boston in the early 1900s. This beloved mayor is Bobby Kennedy's great-grandfather. He was an ardent proponent of land value taxation and one of the leaders of this movement at the time. For Liz and Paul, this discovery was an enormously important piece in the puzzle of understanding the centuries-long historical and mystical story of the higher plans and purpose of the Fitzgerald legacy. Hence the importance of my communicating with you now with the intention and hope that you will bring this economics of peace and justice to the attention of RFK Jr. We are certain that the time is right to bring forward an economics that is out of the right-left box, that can bring masses of people to a unity of intention and purpose to solve our major social problems in the United States. This economics as a way to peace can also guide our foreign policy in a positive direction, including our approach to the Israel-Palestine conflict. I wrote a policy statement about this that I can send you per your request. I am happy to email or mail by post to you articles to supplement this communication and to connect you with Paul Fitzgerald and Liz Gould. I can also connect the Kennedy campaign to movements working for land value tax policy and to our best policy consultants. And then I give my phone number and my email. All the very best to you and for the Kennedy campaign. Alanna Hartzok in Pennsylvania. So cross our fingers, wish us luck. We think we have a clear channel that can move this along. So everybody see a green light in your mind that this will come to fruition.
Right. Well, as we said about this is beyond parties. This is about trying to introduce something that everybody once understood should want to move forward with, who I think pointing out, as Honey Fitz made clear, people who are interested in the people will want this. People who are interested in self-interest amongst their own cronies are not going to want this. So we can easily see who's for the people. This is almost like the test. So I think now we'll be able to review, this is actually would be the cover letter that will be re-edited to be more neutral for anybody who wants to take our information package and send it to your list of people to see if we can't gain some entry into some new opportunities, because we have, of course, the purpose of this particular roundtable is to deal with the real Earth Day celebration, which is March 19th of 2024. And it's a very important history that if you read the invitation, you know a little bit about, and we obviously have a lot more information to, to support that. So right now, the actual celebration, which would be on March 19th, would involve actually, as the invitation said, the bell ringing in the United Nations would actually happen at 11:06 p.m. Not a great time for any kind of gathering to start, but the idea is that this celebration will actually mostly happen at the Henry George School of Social Science at 149 East 38th Street in New York. And there will be an all-day celebration that will be for education and for celebrating, okay, from 10 to 5 p.m. And what happens in the United Nations, one of the problems with the United Nations itself is that this is actually, the bell is outside, but it's within a garden inside the United Nations. So you have to go through the security in order to get in. And this is an unknown. It's been kind of dicey, especially last year with the COVID thing still being an issue. It hasn't really been reestablished completely. So we're really not 100% sure how that part of it could work. But despite that, we will have this all-day affair at the Henry George School. So that is a reason to consider coming to New York, and if you're in the New York area, to try to participate. But we also want people to try to set up these celebrations in their local communities, especially if they can't come to New York or don't have the ability to come to New York, so that they could bring this information, and that's for our information package, which would include the overall information about the real Earth Day being this Equinox Earth Day that John McConnell founded, and it was based on Earth rights principles that he was trying to promote, and it really has gotten lost. So we need to really bring that back, and it becomes the centerpiece. And then what we'll probably be able to do then is organize help people organize the event. So when you read the information, you will then take this letter. So we will be emailing the final letter, that can be the cover letter. We also have the information about the Equinox Earth Day celebration as a separate file. We'll also have the files on Honey Fitz's enthusiasm about Georgist economics, so that we're really trying to build a relationship between the Fitzgerald legacy, between Honey Fitz, and really, and as I said, you can see what the true connection for Honey Fitz was, is that Henry George's economics works for people. And of course, he could see that. Anybody who really wants to do things for people can understand that. And we know that there are very powerful interests that have been subverting that for a long time. So it's going to require a lot more people to really become educated to this and know how straightforward and how much this can solve most of the major problems that we're dealing with today, especially when it comes to things like homelessness, especially, and equalizing the ability for people to be able to work and basically not have their work taxed when many people are living off of unearned income. So these are all the issues that this can really immediately begin to resolve. So as I said, we'll be emailing these materials. So it would be kind of a package that would contain PDF files of some things and front letters and possibly things that would go inside. And this is something that would be emailable. So we hope the info pack really would be the cover letter, and we also have effectively a manifesto that Alanna wrote, and that is a paper that really was, we took the basic King Charles letter and adapted it. So now it's been opened up, so it's neutral. There's no more King Charles focus on it. And we also have an introduction of the Honey-Fitz connection and how we discovered it. So these are all elements that we will be getting out, and we hope that you'll be able to introduce people through your list and people that you might think might be interested. And as I said about, we want to try to use this opportunity, especially with RFK, being on a national platform as he is, and really try to think about important people that you might think, we need to get obviously as many people that might be able to help us break through in terms of, getting media attention for this event. And we've got the focus of, and that's about 6 months from now. We just passed actually the fall equinox. So we're going for the spring equinox in about 6 months. So that's our time frame. And as I said, we'll be sending out this package once the letter is finished for this part of it. And this package also will go out to people like Dennis and RFK and any other people of special interest for this that you might come up with too. So we have, I guess, at this point, any questions,
Yeah, you could raise your hand. I'll try to recognize the questioners. You could put a question in the chat, and we do have the first one from Ruth. How was the real Earth Day hijacked? Who did it and why?
Good question.
Well, Alanna, you probably know more of the actual details of how that happened. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yes, the original idea for an Earth Day came after John McConnell had an inspiration that there should be a day of unity. And then he was meditating and praying about what should be the day. And it really came to him that it should be equinox. And that because it represents equal poise, equal balance between the global north, the global south, equal day, equal night. And so it had the symbolism of the day of harmony and equality. And then he presented the idea to the San Francisco City Council, and they did pass a resolution. So it was proclaimed then. And he had many other, there's a very beautiful proclamation by 39 worldwide dignitaries, artists and presidents of countries signed that back in that was then the proclamation was put forward. So John was at the UN for a meeting of UNESCO, and he was talking about Earth Day, and there were two guys there who were organizing the environmental teach-in for April 22nd. And they thought, oh, that's a pretty cool name, Earth Day. We're going to call our environmental teach-in Earth Day from now on. So that was connected with academics. It was nicer weather in the global north in April 22nd compared to the March Equinox. So it really became an Earth Day promulgated by academics and corporations. Big business thought this would be a really good way for them to get some positive attention. And so quite a bit of money flowed into this April 22nd Earth Day. And because money buys attention and all kinds of things, as we know, and John McConnell certainly didn't have that kind of money behind the equinox, that has become what we know, what many people is Earth Day. But all the decades since the original proclamation for the equinox, except for just a couple years during COVID, there have been the ringing of the peace bell and the United Nations with usually an hour-long program of talks and music and poetry. And John formed the Earth Society Foundation. He co-founded it with Margaret Mead, as I said, and Ruth Daunt at the time, UN Secretary General. I mean, there were very high-level people, very much favorable to and endorsing the Equinox Earth Day. So the spirit of it has continued throughout all these decades. And it has, though, not brought forward John McConnell's Earth Rights Economics of Peace, which is Georgist economics. John was a thoroughgoing student and advocate for Henry George. He understood this to be the perennial wisdom teachings on justice and peace. I had invited John to come to my community and give some talks, and he and I had also co-written an article on land value tax, so we can be posting that as well. So he was his biography is My Life at Age 96. John McConnell wrote a very impactful biography, 500 some pages. He was not just only Earth Day, but a Minute for Peace, a satellite that would be like the People's Satellite. Early on, he proposed. He was really a very high soul. And well, we want to now, starting with this March 2024, now really bring forward the economics of peace of the original Earth Day.
We are resetting Earth Day.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, it is no surprise that John McConnell's focus, because Georgia's economics has been cut down by, we know the neoliberalism was created in order pretty much to stop the power of the Georgia's economics, which Honey Fitz represented very much the kind of people who saw a positive future for the people with these solutions. And that's what we have to bring back. It's still there. There's plenty of people who know how to do these things. They just need to be given the assistance to break on through. And that's where it really counts. It's in the numbers. We've got to get enough people, across this country. And that's why our hope is that we can convince RFK, no matter what goes on with this presidential campaign, he has to include his grandfather's solution, his great-grandfather's solution, to the problems of the United States. That's to go from Boston with Honey Fitz to the nation with RFK Jr. So that's our hope.
I want to, yes, Alanna.
Another quick note that our emphasis also on having people having events in their own communities. It can be just a dinner party, but that the conversation would focus on Earth rights and economics for peace. The Fitzgerald legacy, celebration for March Equinox. We have, from our International Union for Land Value Tax, we have people in quite a number of countries now who are already beginning to plan and have made commitments to having events. India, Philippines, Nigeria, I think Indonesia, Costa Rica, I think UK. Anyhow, we're just kind of starting to get that ball rolling internationally, but we'll be approaching a number of other organizations and inviting them to get to their networks with this information and get people having the event worldwide. And then that exact moment of the equinox can be like in New York, we said it's 11:06, but it's at various times, of course, worldwide. But the synergy, harmony, and unity of having people just ring a little bell wherever they are at that exact moment of equinox and the moment of silence, the minute of silence, we would like that to happen as well. So we're putting out the call, and we count on all of you to join in this effort for March 2024.
I have a question. It's for Ed Dodson. What are your thoughts about all you've heard so far, and what might you want to talk about in relation to the note that you sent me through the chat?
Oh, well, I mean, what I've heard so far is certainly, wonderful. I mean, I've studied this era of politics that Connie Fitzgerald was involved in pretty intensely, and it's still a big part of my research work. So there's no promise, but I suspect there's going to be more findings to come out as I go through the archives. But I'm hopeful we'll be able to do something here in Philadelphia, perhaps at Temple University. I might be able to organize something for the Earth Day celebration that Alanna was talking about. All that is to be discussed. The note I sent to Bruce was basically to offer, if I could become the co-host for 5 minutes, I could walk people through the steps to get to John Fitzgerald's writings that I've compiled on my website. So that's something I can show you, so that everyone here and anyone who views the session later could take a look at and read some of this material that I found very interesting on their own.
There we go.
Okay, so do you see what the page that says "Welcome to the School of Cooperative Individualism"?
Yes.
Okay, for those who don't know me at all, I mean, this has been my project since I came across the principles of cooperative individualism back in the 1990s. The origins of that discovery were a lecture given by a historian named Paul Gaston in Fairhope, Alabama, which was a conference celebrating the founding of Fairhope, which is a utopian community, or was a utopian community, somewhat founded on the principles of cooperative individualism, and that included Henry George's input on the economics. So this project started in 1997, and part of it has been to compile a biographical history of everyone that I can find who has contributed to the ideas, and it's morphed into something more. But from this homepage, there's a link on the left that says biographical history. And this takes you to this section of the website, and it comes up showing the first page option is the United States. That's a little bit US centric, but when you hit the biographies by country, it tells you what information is available about individuals in every one of these countries. And so to get to the section that we would have John Fitzgerald's information, you scroll down to the United States until you get to F. Click on that and hit go. And now it brings you to a page in the website where biographical information is provided on everyone that I have researched and found in all sorts of source documents since 1997 when I started this project. And I scroll down until I get to the Fitzgeralds. You can see it's quite extensive. Okay, and so here's John Fitzgerald and the biographical information that I have on him, and the everything that's in blue that shows an underline is linked to that direct document. So everything that I've pulled out of his book of letters and speeches that I felt I wanted to highlight is there, and there's quite a few of them. And my research on him ends with 1912, and there have been a few other things that have shown up as well. And so I have a good deal of more research works to do. And for those in the meeting, I have a bit of additional information on another prominent Fitzgerald that's involved in our meeting. That's Wendell. And so there are several. I don't have a lot of Wendell's biographical facts. Maybe he one day will provide them. But I have several papers that he wrote that are highlighted there. And so this is how you get to the information. And as I said, it's all, oops, I got a coding here. See if they're all coding. No, okay. So here's John Fitzgerald's message on the Irish exiles that was written, published in 1910. So this is basically where you can get the information.
Wow,
Fantastic.
excellent, yeah.
Really wonderful.
So Kris, you can unhost me if you like.
Maybe.
You're on, Ed.
Great job, Ed. Thank you.
Well, it's.
Well, if anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to respond.
Yeah, well, I do wonder, you obviously must have other important people of that period, if that's, not just that period, but because it seems as if it was so lively then, that there was a kind of, I mean, the way that John Fitzgerald was talking about, the things at the time that the Democrats he felt were doing for the people that the Republicans weren't doing, which at that time it was sort of, very well, I think, assumed that the Republicans, had more for already wealthy people. That was, the ones that they took care of. But I did wonder if you had any other examples from the time that we could use to support actually Honey Fitz.
Well, Alanna referred to Tom L. Johnson. And Tom L. Johnson was one of the strongest supporter of Henry George's campaign at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century as mayor of Cleveland, Ohio. He had been in the U.S. House of Representatives, and he was a prominent progressive Democrat. So John, and there were a whole group of people surrounding him. One of his main assistant in Cleveland when he was mayor was Frederick C. Howe. And Frederick Howe was appointed commissioner of Ellis Island under the Wilson administration. There are just so many of these individuals who were, their activism was stimulated by their knowledge of Henry George, either their personal association with George or they became stalwart supporters after George died and were very much involved in the movement. And there are any number of other people that I've researched and actually prepared some biographical lectures on. The most recent one I've just alerted to Alanna was of the Reverend Herbert Bigelow, who was a minister who got the religion of Henry George and became very much involved. He was the pastor of the People's Congregational Church in Cincinnati, Ohio. He went into politics, very prominent in the Democratic Party in Ohio, elected to the state House of Representatives, to eventually the U.S. House of Representatives. So there are all these individuals who lived remarkable lives and did everything they could to keep the mission alive and to keep progressive reform alive, despite all of the obstacles of people like Henry Cabot Lodge and that class.
Yeah, well, this is.
Can I ask a question about Henry George?
Certainly.
Why did he continue to run for mayor of New York? What did he think he would be able to do as the mayor of New York?
He was hoping he would not get elected. The United Labor Party in New York at the time was a coalition of labor groups, and they looked for a candidate that they all could support. And of course, within the labor movement, there were many socialists, and they chose Henry George because he was such a populist candidate and a well-known figure. And George basically did not want to run, but he was approached by the Tammany Hall people, and basically they said to him, well, George, you can run, but you're not going to get elected. He said, there's no way that you're going to get elected mayor. And Henry George said, well, thank you for telling me that and relieving me, because I really don't want to be mayor and take on all that responsibility. And the Tammany Hall person said, well, if you run, you're going to raise hell. And George said, well, that does it. I want to raise hell. I'm committed to run. And so he ran against the Tammany candidate, Abram Hewitt. He ran against Theodore Roosevelt, who was the Republican candidate. And the New York one of the New York papers the next day after the election, in which Henry George came in second, said, Henry George's official vote is 68,000 votes, and most of the rest of them are floating down the Hudson River.
Mhm.
Then he ran a second time. That was
Yes.
the first run.
Yes.
And he ran the second time against medical advice. His doctor said, your health is bad. You're risking a stroke or heart attack. And he had a wonderful relationship with his wife. And she said, you must do what you're called to do. So it wasn't just that he didn't want to, it was a calling. When he ran that second time, he knew he was literally risking his life. And 2 weeks, I think it was, away from election day, he
had a stroke.
so exhausted. He was just giving talks all over the place that he died of a stroke. Okay, so he gave it all, this mission that he had, to the very end. And I see Carol's hands up, but I did want to say back to Ed and the honey fits. There was an article I'd like you to point out that Honey Fitz wrote, where he's talking about all the land price and that's housing price escalation in Boston. And he goes through details and numbers. And I was real impressed with that, because it's the same story. It's gone on 100+ years that we're having now the problem of affordable housing and too high land values. And we know, as people with the Henry George work, that this is the law of rent. It's invariable that as development so-called proceeds, as there's more progress, so-called abundance, the land values escalate faster than wages. And this is the driver for the gross wealth inequality today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol.
Well, I think we all know that the land and the money issues are tied together, and that there's been as strong of an effort to silence or eliminate or forget the great monetary reformists too. And I was just wondering, Ed, Gerald Grattan McGeer, who instituted monetary reform in Canada, which was like huge, was sort of disappeared from history. Do you have anything on him too? Because I'm sure he must also have been a Georgist to some degree.
To tell you the truth, I don't remember. Under the Canadian listing, you can go and check on your own to see if there's anything there.
Okay.
I mean, what I've compiled comes from probably a dozen main publications, but other subsidiary ancillary publications. Like anyone that does this kind of research, you're going through and you're looking for certain things, and all of a sudden you discover something you never expected, and then it takes you off in another direction, and a month later you get back to where you were. I mean, it's really hard to keep a focus, because a lot of this is so interesting to get into the details, which is exactly what happened to me in discovering the work of Reverend Herbert Bigelow, a minor figure up until, a month ago for me. And then all of a sudden I kept finding his sermons and his addresses, and they're powerful. And then his political activity. And I was just astounded at what a powerful individual he was, and the influence he had on his time, and the fact that nobody knows who he was. I mean, just very much like Henry George.
Who was he?
Well, you'll have to look at my video on him on my YouTube channel, and it's only about a half an hour, and you can find out everything you'd ever wanted to know about Herbert Bigelow.
And your channel is Edward Dodson.
Yes, go to YouTube and put in my name, and the channel comes up, and you can spend an unbelievable amount of time there if you have it.
I've got a go ahead, Carol, please.
Oh, I'm very concerned too about the co-option and particularly the UN. I mean, the UN has already signed agreements that they're going to partner with the World Economic Forum, that they're there for business interests. I think, to me, they're not at all legitimate now, and the Sustainable Development Goals have been thoroughly discredited. They're just lovely fluff covering up sort of a really dark agenda which serves transnational interests. So I don't know if this is really the best strategic approach because the UN has so compromised itself.
Flood them with Georgists, okay? I mean, we can take over the UN, okay? We can, we can. I mean, they aren't completely beholden to the powers that be.
That's right.
And again, all it takes for them to win is for us to stand down. And so we need to stand up big time.
I'd like to add a little bit to Carol's point, because there's no question that this whole agenda, in fact, I made this point when I saw that Martin Strong's name was on the list of people who was part of the original Earth Day celebration. So it's obvious that, and again, I'm not bringing that up to make an opinion about him. I'm just bringing up knowing there are a lot of people who'd see that name and say, I'm having nothing to do with that. That means that celebration that goes on at the UN with the peace bell is a fraud. That's my point to you, Carol. There actually are real people in real time who actually honor what happened back then. And what they're doing is keeping it alive, and they need our help. They need our help to try to shock the system itself, inside itself. That's why we need the numbers. Okay, and Jim Morrison, we got the numbers, but we've got to get a strong single voice. And we feel that this subject has the potential, by the point that it was originally started with the foundation of George's principles, makes it more interesting. And they were, like a lot of good things, they were made to go away. All right. And so we're saying we want to bring it back. And I think when people begin to realize that the institution is literally like a cutout, okay, yeah, it's been taken over in many ways, but it's not ever 100%. And that's why, and we aren't in a position to, I think, to ignore the fact that we really have to attract people out to get out of those mindsets within those institutions. So I think what Kris just said about, if we just do nothing towards them. So, but I think we have to be very clear in what we articulate, that we're not naive about that, Carol, is what I would say to you. That is absolutely understood, okay? But as as I mentioned about when Honey Fitz is talking about the Democratic Party, okay, back in the early 20th century, all right, he's saying the early Democratic Party was absolutely for the people, all right? I don't know, but I imagine it probably was more for the people back then than we feel it is right now, in terms of the kind of interests that have taken over so much of the Democratic Party. So, but we don't have automatically new structures that we can then go into, okay, and then start, creating a sort of a competition with what the UN represents.
And with numbers, we can elbow the other people out of the room.
Well, that's it. We've got to actually get that's my point to you here. We do need to get the numbers, and this information is going to appeal to people. And I think just like Honey Fitz was talking about the people, all right, that's that 90% are the people. All right, yes, there are people who are, aligned, but they, their interests obviously are really not with the global corporations. We know that. And obviously, if we can get more people to understand these principles and to see how realistic they are in solving many of the great problems we're faced with today, and that they've been tested and they've been around for well over 100 years. Okay. That's the whole point, to build that. And I do think too that the idea of reclaiming, as our point was for this roundtable, to reset the economic justice and peace that started actually by renaming the real Earth Day. So we got a very, it's like we could turn that into a meme kind of, we can try to compete with this takeover process that they're so good at. Why not? We've got a lot of smart people. We should be able to come up with a good a good solid campaign to challenge that.
I got a quick question for you, Liz, but actually for Ed. Is that a new hand raised, Ed?
Yes.
What have you got to ask for yourself?
Well,
Or say?
I just a little bit of history, but first I want to say the future might have been very different if our friend and colleague Alanna had been elected to the U.S. House of Representatives.
That's right.
And I'll put that in historical context. When Henry George died, they drafted his son, Henry George Jr., to stand in his stead. George Jr. lost the election, but he eventually was elected to the House of Representatives and from Brooklyn, and he served 2 terms in the House. Now, Tom L. Johnson had served in the House of Representatives, and he had tried to introduce a single tax bill for the District of Columbia. So this bill would have basically put the single tax in effect in the District of Columbia. Only 6 other members of the House signed on to the bill. So when Herbert Bigelow was elected to the House of Representatives, he delivers a speech to his colleagues, and he says, in effect, I'm going to talk to you about taxation. I know you don't understand a thing about taxation, and I'm going to eventually introduce a bill that I know you won't vote for. But my mentor, my longtime friend, Tom L. Johnson, introduced this bill into the House 40 some years ago, and I'm going to introduce it again. He got 6 votes. I want to see how many of you will vote for this single tax measure for the District of Columbia. And he got 43. So perhaps if Alanna had been elected and introduced the same bill, she might have gotten 143. But we do need some people who embrace these principles to be in public office and to really work hard for the principles against overwhelming odds.
I got a question for Liz and Paul and Alanna, and you too, Ed. If the resetting of Earth Day is a wonderful excuse to bring Henry George economics onto the table, what's a second or third as robust strategy in addition to bringing it to presidential candidates? What else? What top 2 or 3 such strategies like that, if there are others that are that strong, that we might focus on for the ensuing months going forward? Resetting Earth Day.
Celebrities.
Say it.
A well-known celebrity to be
Okay.
a voice for it. I mean, that could be more powerful than a member of Congress, actually,
Okay.
And
True, that's really true. Do you have any
Absolutely.
Because
suggestions?
this is a decentralized. We want to take power, some of us do, away from the central government in DC. And this is
Let's-
a way to do so, to decentralize. So
Let's drill into that another minute here between Alanna and Ed Dodson. What top celebrities come to mind as potential mascots we could lure?
mascots.
Well, I'm of the age that I would choose someone like Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to start brainstorming about those kind of things.
Well,
Yeah, if we could get one that is well known to the younger crowd.
And everyone looks like it. We
Well,
got a lot
let's-
of veterans on this roundtable, of these roundtables. For folks who are watching on Facebook Live or who will watch the playback on YouTube in a couple of weeks, Paul, Liz, Alanna, Ed, what is a succinct 60 seconds, 90-second teaching on who the heck's Henry George and what's so exciting about him?
well, how about if you add, why was Honey Fitz so impressed with?
We'll take that as let's take that as a
We wanna
follow-up
bring in the
question.
Fitzgerald legacy thing. We want to
Okay.
get it in there. And by the way, it's really important to understand that when it comes to JFK, there are an awful lot of people who don't have any idea what the Fitzgerald legacy really means. They're only focused on the Kennedy side of
Liz,
the dynasty.
you just took 2 steps away from my question. Not only the Fitzgerald legacy, but JFK. I want to ask for 60 to 90 seconds. Somebody please teach the new audience Who the heck's Henry George and what's so exciting about him?
Do you want me to go, Alanna?
I'll start. Okay. And this is why the Fitzgerald and Honey was so excited about Henry George, because when people are for the people, they get what Henry George is talking about, because his main problem, which he saw, which he impacted him and his family early on, and he saw it in India and Philadelphia and the old cities of the United States and worldwide. Progress and poverty was his masterwork. Why, with increasing so-called progress and development, is there still poverty? So his crucial question was, why is there this gross wealth inequality? And he solved the problem, he solved the riddle, and that in fact put him in line with the perennial wisdom teachings on economic justice and peace.
Thank you. And Ed, augment that and give us a resource or two to the brand new audience. Where can I learn about this very cool cat?
Well, you can learn about it on my website, the School of Cooperative Individualism. You can learn about it by visiting the website of the Henry George School of Social Science. You can learn about it by visiting the website of the International Union for Land Value Taxation. A browser search on Henry George will get as much material as you can absorb in a year or two.
And your site is cooperative-individualism.org.
Correct.
And
Now,
the Land Value Taxation Organization is VIU.org?
IU.org, yes.
VIU.org.
But
Okay.
I want to say this about Henry George.
Briefly, because I do owe Liz time to share and tie in the importance of that.
Right.
Honey Fitz.
The philosopher Mortimer Adler said, "We seek freedom when we should be seeking liberty." And Adler said the definition of liberty is freedom constrained by justice. Henry George's remarkable insight was to understand what constitutes justice. What sort of socio-political arrangements, institutions constitute a just society? And in that, he focused on the injustice of private property in nature, in land and natural opportunities. And that is George's genius.
And that also is the perennial wisdom, which I have been thrilled to learn through these roundtables, which is so foreign to my average American mindset of private property. Whatever I can get and keep is mine, and whatever you can get and keep is yours. And it's radical to Americans for the most part to even know what are the commons as a concept or a thing in history. Thank you very much. Liz, I want to let you tie in once again for the new audience who has been listening this whole roundtable. This angle, please. The amazing element of the Fitzgerald legacy in terms of what it indicates of a mystical, magical, spiritual, transcendent reality that must be top of mind if we're going to be as effective as we can be in our full human potential.
Well, I think that the relationship that JFK had with his grandfather is simply not known, not understood. Most people focus on his father, who was obviously very powerful and very well known. And what we want to do is make people aware that an awful lot of the reasons that JFK is still as beloved as he is what he learned from his grandfather, and letting everyone know that part of what he learned was the economics of peace through the Georgia solutions. And that's what we want to make people aware of. And that's what we especially want to make RFK aware of, that is and that he was actually in his time, Honey Fitz was actually preparing the ground for JFK to take office and start building the peace that we all wanted.
Thank you, Liz. I want to refer everyone to Roundtable 6, as mentioned before, which further explains what Liz just talked about, which is on YouTube, all the other roundtables on the channel called Valediction Vision. Now, allow me to get to a number of things in our remaining amount of minutes, first of which is, Wendell, I do see your hand up. How are you?
I'm good. I couldn't let this roundtable go without chiming in as the other Fitzgerald on the call here. One of the, I think I understood the question that you'd asked. Bruce, that how do we promote this going forward? It occurs to I finally got the point, and I don't know that it's been well proven or there's documentation of or a smoking gun that the corporate interests hijacked Earth Day for their own purposes, and they didn't want anything to do with any suggestion of economic justice or McConnell's. They understood that he was a Georgist and understood what that was about. So I suggest that the theme of these days is that every institution that we trusted and thought would work for us, democracy, big pharma, the media, the free press, all of it has been hijacked by the corporate interests. And not that there's anything wrong, particularly with corporations per se, but it's the right that we give them. We've handed it to them that they can collect all this massive amount of unearned income, starting with the private ownership of the earth. So I finally got wow, look, everything has been co-opted, and Earth Day was one of them. And it would be such a powerful thing. Not a big deal. There's no huge economic interest to oppose it, but to say, let's really acknowledge that the original Earth Day and the most sensible Earth Day date is the spring equinox in the Northern Hemisphere.
Wendell, I wonder what resource is your favorite, or would you recommend to the new discoverer of Henry George and his economics, if in addition to what Ed and Alanna have shared?
I think what Ed suggested, if you go online and drop in what do we know about Henry George, you will find more stuff than you could ever possibly take in. I recently did that the question was from a younger, a very capable activist woman here in Ashland, Oregon. And she asked me, I was talking to one of my cohorts who is a member of the Pachamama Alliance. And we've been doing various things here around the Earth Day, in April. And she heard me talking to her and said, what are you talking about? Well, I'm talking about this guy, Henry George, because it relates to economic justice, all of that. And she's, how do I find out about him? Look it on and online. The next thing I heard about a week later was, why haven't we heard about this before?
Well, that's our opportunity. Yes, Liz.
Go to the internet. It's there.
Thank you.
I have a suggestion, by the way, for everybody who wants to go online and look up Henry George. That's fine. But I think we have to get everybody Alanna's Earth Rights Manifesto, because what you'll get there is a solid grounding. So when you go out to look for stuff, you already have a conception of what you're really looking for. It is not to say that it may not be good information, but when you get it in bits and pieces, you don't kind of get the whole concept. And that's what the manifesto can give you. So we'll make sure, because that's going to be a part of our package.
That's a question for our wrapping up here in the next few minutes. And in the chat, someone asked Liz, where can folks right now? I'll get to you, Marty. Oh, good. I'm glad you. Where can folks go to ensure they get the packet of information you mentioned?
We have to put it together. It's not completely ready, but the manifesto is in a form that it can be emailed to people.
It is right now?
Yeah. The manifesto is in a form where
we don't have it on valediction.net yet?
I don't think so. I don't think that's been posted yet.
Well, then good news for Gordon, who put in the chat his email address, which we will not say out loud because this is a public event. Marty Lewis.
I wanted to say, Wendell, you were talking about the Pachamama Alliance. And interestingly enough, Liz, the campaign manager for Dennis Kucinich was also the president of the Pachamama Alliance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And who was that?
Dot Maver?
No.
Who was that?
Dennis Kucinich. Judy Kimmel, who's the president of the campaign for the U.S. Department of Peace. Is
So
also
we
the
was-
president of the
Pachamama.
Pachamama Alliance.
Mhm.
And there's also a connection with her and Dot Maber, but we'll get into
Right.
that later.
Right, right. They're
Thank
all,
you.
they're all.
It's all
important.
connected.
Right.
Carol put in the chat, she waved me off, but I read it and I have to put this on the record here. Out of the shadows.org and into the light.movie. These are two documentaries which came out in 2020 and the latest in 2023, which powerfully look at the manipulation of the public mind through media, Hollywood, the tech giants, which I think we need to take into consideration if we are trying to challenge the system. Look at this segue. TrineDay.com for over 160 books that also do the same. I'm not denigrating your contribution here. I can't wait to read those, but especially because they reminded me of a TrineDay book I'm in the middle of right now, Tavistock Institute by Daniel Estelin.
Mhm.
And Alanna has written, yes, claiming the commons, but with private use rights conditional upon payment of the land rent / commons rent / land value tax to the community. So land can be privately held, but not hoarded or a commodity for profit. The land value tax is a simple shift in the property tax, so it's not disruptive. It's already implemented to some degree in several places. And Ruth says, thanks for a great discussion and airing of important. We only have a minute or two. I'm so excited to tell everybody that this Saturday, September 30th, from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern, Ed Dodson is my guest on my TNT radio show live, and that URL is tntradio.live. Will be the live hour at 4 p.m. this Saturday, the 30th. Ed, I really am going to just ask you, and just to teach all of the kind of things you've been teaching right here, but especially, you know, all those stories of all that happened in the 1800s, 1900s about the economics of Henry George, and how it was not until 2023 that many of us here heard about it for the first time. So thank you very much.
Looking forward to it, Bruce.
Thank you. Yeah. I saw Wendell. Yes.
Just a quick, the other day, it occurred to me that I'm involved in the local grange here. We're all about agriculture, supporting that. There's a lot of talk about regenerative agriculture. People, it's kind of speaks for itself. But then it occurred to me, well, taxation, the Georges, the reason I'm interested in that is that this is a form of, we can call it regenerative taxation.
Mm.
And rather, the LVT, land value, that's good. It's not just a tax reform. It is the possibility of regenerating, the entire economy, the ground of our being here.
Thank you, Wendell.
And everybody's welcome to use that, free of charge. So go ahead. Please.
How nice. I've got to ask for last thoughts from Alanna, and then Paul and Liz, and then from Kris. Alanna.
We're going to keep rolling this out infinitum. I mean, till death do us part, I think. But with the upcoming Equinox Earth Day, we're seeing that as people launch events and programs worldwide, they will also be urged to launch projects for policy implementation, and they will receive help assistance, guidance, consulting, pro bono for the actual implementation. And in my life working with this, it's a shift to go from this is a great idea to some great person should do it, to pointing at yourself and saying, I'm the great person, I got to do it. If not me, who will? It's a shift in your self-identity. It's a big step, and we're going to want to urge people to assume that kind of personal power that they can do this.
Absolutely. Paul and Liz.
Liz.
Well, everybody knows my spiel by now. We're going to get you this information. I want you to get, put your own name on the letter if you want to. Send it out to people make sure that You know, if there are particularly special people that might have a little added plus that you can think of, that you can get this information to, and really, you know, work at getting them interested to go further with us. That's what we need from all of us here.
You know, I just add what Alanna just said about, you know, everyone is that great person. Everyone needs to do it on their own and have the confidence that it will actually make a difference.
Yeah.
And you know, just read enough about it so that you have can be fluid in conversation, and then start from there. But it has to be done. I mean, we really don't have any choice but to understand this.
Before I give Kris the last word, I'll just augment what Paul just said and what Alanna just said. It used to be common knowledge that to be an American was someone who was self-governing, which was, I'm going to participate in the conversations that decide the rules under which I'm going to live. If I can't physically be there, I'm going to send a representative, but that person is representing me. And to step into action would take a personal revolution for so many Americans these days who've been completely disempowered by their whole upbringing and the whole culture. And you can do it, you know, so parent yourself like a great father and a great mother. You got this, you can do it. You'll fail and learn and fail and learn and fail and learn. And that's the whole journey of life. My boss at TrineDay, publisher of my book too, in addition to Paul and Liz's, Kris Millegan.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. And again, thank you all for, you know, spending your time around this table. And, you know, change happens with heroic acts, okay? And they go everywhere from that guy standing in front of the tank in China to just the act of reading a book, okay? And you know, I've done a lot of study into power structures and history and things, and we have a very much of a chance here with the personal computer and the internet, okay, has given you, okay, an amazing amount of power, okay, an amazing amount of information that you have at your virtual fingertips, okay? And, you know, there are way more of us than them, and actually them are us, but they just, you know, are on a different path. They don't know it, okay? And we can change them. We can turn that around, okay? I mean, we have a dynamite opportunity here to change the course of human events and create a better world for our children and their children, okay? And, you know, Alanna wants to turn us into a bunch of dinglings, okay, on the next equinox. And, you know, let's do that, okay? Because again, that is us people making the reset, okay? And that's what, you know, we have way more power than they do, okay? If we just stand up and exercise it. So onwards to a better future, onwards, amen.
Here, here.